Hi everyone, welcome back. In today's video, I want to go over my current bullet journal / planner setup and talk about some of the ways that I have adapted it and adjusted it over the last couple of years. Last year, I was diagnosed with ADHD, and I started kind of reassessing how I do things in terms of working and planning. And I realized a lot of the things I was doing previously in my bullet journal just weren't really working for me. They weren't keeping me on task, they weren't keeping me focused. And so I want to go over some of the ways that I have found to make my bullet journal work better for me and my particular situation, and how I'm going to continue using it in order to get the most out of it that I can. Also, I am recording a voiceover over previous audio. It turns out there was way too much background noise in my original video, and unfortunately, I had to turn off all of my fans and my AC in order to record this, and it is a billion degrees, and I am dying right now. So I'm sorry if this video sounds a little rushed, or if I go through things a little quickly. Basically, the sooner I finish, the sooner I can turn my AC back on. That's also going to explain why a lot of my hand motions in frame aren't really going to match the audio as I'm speaking. So for the most part, up until the last couple of months, my general process was to come up with a spread or a theme that I thought looked really cool, and I would basically just work my entire planner around whether or not it looked neat, not really whether or not it was something that was practical or something that I would actually use. And so I ended up settling on something similar to this for most of the first part of the year. I would have some kind of dashboard type page on the left-hand side with all of my habits and tasks and kind of like important things to take note of. And then on the right side, I would have a box for each day of the week, and I would write down specific tasks for each of those days, plus things like work hours and appointments and stuff. However, the problem with this kind of setup is my brain doesn't work this way. For a lot of people, you could just make a list of things to do and you can kind of like prioritize it in your brain and just run through everything you need to do. For me, if I have a list of tasks, it's really, really hard for me to start or stop because I get overwhelmed because I don't know where my focus is supposed to be. And so I have found that designating specific times for specific tasks makes it much more likely that I'm going to actually follow through on it. I mean, it doesn't work every single time, but it is way more successful than when I just have an amorphous list of things. So at that point, I started researching different kinds of planners that work for like hourly and daily planning because I wanted to find some kind of template to work off of that would be better for the way my brain tends to work on a day-to-day basis. I started watching a lot of Plan With Me videos where people had Hobonichis, especially the Hobonichi cousin, and I was like, this is amazing. This is the exact setup that I need because I want something where I can break down the day from start to finish and know what I'm doing, but still be able to kind of track other things that maybe don't have specific times. Another thing that I really, really like about the Hobonichi cousin is the fact that it has a daily journaling section in the back. And that was another change that I ended up making in the past few months, is that I realized I actually really, really enjoy daily journaling. It's obviously not necessary for me in terms of like planning and stuff like that, but for my mental health, it's been wonderful to be able to like make spreads and write out how I'm feeling that day or keep track of important things. And it's been awesome because I get to like work through my stickers and be creative and come up with spreads in a way that makes me feel like I've done something productive that day. So it has really done wonders for keeping me coming back to my journals and my planners because I want to be using them. One thing I have noticed with my particular kind of like personality and the way my brain works, or I don't know if it's my ADHD, whatever it is, I have found that if I don't find something fun and aesthetically pleasing and something I want to be looking at, I just don't use it, which is probably why for the longest time my spreads were based purely on aesthetics. But now that I feel like I have a creative outlet with daily journaling, I can make my weekly spreads and my actual planner part a little bit more simplistic and a little bit more functional. It's still colorful and things like that, but I don't feel like that's the only place where my creativity is in my journals anymore. I've also spent some time reassessing what actually needs to be in my planner because for the longest time, I was putting together spreads that I thought should be in there, but I realized I wasn't using them consistently at all. And when you're bullet journaling, you have to set up every spread that you do, and there's no point in wasting time setting up pages that you never end up touching again. So I had to kind of go back and realize what wasn't being used in order to realize what I actually wanted to focus on. So when I moved into a new bullet journal for June, I decided to start trying this new hourly setup. And my initial plan was something like this, where I had a weekly dashboard with my weekly tasks and planners on one page, and then the next 7 pages would be a mix of a daily journal and an hourly task page. So I wrote in my hours from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., and I would write down my daily stuff there, and then on the same page I would do my daily journaling. This was definitely a step in the right direction, but it still wasn't totally working for me, and I realized it was because I had separated out my daily planning onto individual pages. I'm the type of person who really needs to have that weekly planner set up at the beginning of the week because I need to see all of my days next to each other. Otherwise, I have a really hard time prioritizing and planning and figuring out which tasks are supposed to go on which days. So even though this was kind of getting there, it totally wasn't working for me. So I decided to switch things up again for July, and honestly, this is the month where it finally feels like I've figured out the thing that works for me. So, a quick breakdown of how I set up my months right now. I always start off with a monthly overview calendar, which I use to track any important dates or events, things like birthdays or the bug off in Animal Crossing New Horizons. And I've also started tracking my YouTube videos here, so I've done these in the past before and it's always been functional, so I didn't bother changing this at all. The next spread is my tracker spreads, and these are my only trackers for the entire month. I switched them from weekly to monthly because I like to see overall trends throughout the month, and it's much easier to see them in this format. And I also only have to set them up once at the beginning, and then I'm good on setting them up for the entire month. It's much easier than doing it on a weekly basis, and I just like how it looks better this way, so I've stuck with it so far. I track my sleep by hour, I track my water by ounces. I am clearly not getting enough sleep, nor am I getting enough water, both of which I knew already, but now I have a nice visual for it. The second page is basically everything else I want to track, but that doesn't necessarily need to be in graph form. And I have it roughly organized by things like general health, like tracking my cycle or tracking things like headaches and stomach aches. I have a section for my wrist and my hand because I do struggle with tendinitis, so I like to know kind of what's been hurting and when and things like that. As you can see, it's been fatigued and aching dully pretty much every single day, which isn't great, but it is good to know it. So if I ever have to talk to my physical therapist about it, I have sort of a thing to reference it. I also track my moods and my emotions, whether or not it's been a good or a bad day. For the most part, I haven't had any amazing days, but I have had mostly good and content days, and I've only had 2 bad days, so that is not too shabby. I also track things like my anxiety and depression episodes, as well as if I've had good or poor focus, as well as if I'm feeling restless. The very last section is just miscellaneous. It's me tracking my medications that I need to take every day, as well as things like my Duolingo, any kind of exercise and movement, and my wrist exercises, which I am also not doing enough. And then here I have my weekly setup that I've finally settled on, and I feel like it's the one that's really finally working for me. I can see my entire week from Monday through Sunday, so that makes it really easy to spread out the tasks that I need to do and know what days I have available and what days I don't. On the left-hand side, I always have a top 3 list, and those are the top 3 things I want to focus on that week and get done if at all possible. And then I have a ton of space for a running task list. At this point, I will break down the things that I need to do in order to finish those top 3 things. Like if I want to do a video, I have to film it and then edit it and do a voiceover. So I'll list all of those things in tasks. And I will also write down other things I need to get done, like groceries or laundry or chores or anything like that. Monday through Friday is labeled from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. I'm not normally up that early and I usually don't work that late, but I like to have it in case there's something else I want to note, and I don't feel the need for anything beyond those hours. I also don't do hourly for the weekend because it's generally not needed. But having this is so good for visualizing what I need to get done and when I need to get it done by. For me, it's just so helpful to have a start time and an end time for something because it feels like I know what I'm supposed to be doing. And it's also really helpful for me to not overbook my schedule because I have to kind of really think about how long something is going to take me. And then when I write it down, I realize like if that's going to take 3 hours of my day, I can't do 10 other things that also take that much time. So it keeps me from overbooking myself and kind of overworking myself because I have to be conscious of how long it realistically takes me to do things. I mentioned before that consistency really works for me, so after I settled on this layout, it's been the only one I've used for my weekly spreads. I set them up all exactly the same, and the only thing I change around is the colors and kind of the decor as I'm planning out. And that is what keeps me interested because before I felt like I had to do different spreads all of the time to stay interested in what I was doing. And then I realized the template can be the same every single week throughout the year. And I really get much more enjoyment in the stickers that I use or the washi that I use and things like that. So that's kind of where my creativity comes through without having to sacrifice functionality. I am also still doing a daily journaling entry, which has been really great. And then what I will do on one side of that is I will section off a little bit of it and I will write down today, and then I will write down a bullet point list of anything I want to get done that day. I will also sometimes write things like shopping list or like things I need to pack or whatever. And I know this seems really repetitive, kind of having like a top 3 list and then a task list and then everything listed in my calendar and then listed again on my daily task page. But for me, that really, really works. I have a really hard time remembering things that need to get done, especially like quote unquote adulting things like payments and bills and things like that. And when I write it down multiple times, it makes it much more likely that I'll remember it. So for me, repetition just really works. So if you wanted to do something similar to this, you definitely don't have to write it down that many times, but I have found that for my brain, it works super well. I've still been having a really great time with my daily logs. This is the first time I've consistently journaled pretty much ever, and it's been really, really awesome to kind of keep track of what I've been doing or how I've been feeling, keeping track of things that I think are important, and it's been a great way to be creative, but doing it expressly for myself. As somebody who posts a lot on the internet, a lot of the things I create are for an audience or they're for other people. And when I journal, it is purely for me. It's something that I enjoy. And whether it be something as simple as like swatching new pens or noting exciting things that happen in Animal Crossing, I finally got Zucker on my island. It's really something where I can just express myself and not feel like I'm doing it for views or for likes or anything like that. Sadly, as much as I love this setup, I did hit a snag with it, and that snag is how much space it takes up. So I use the Artist Loft bullet journals from Michaels, and I do really like the paper quality. It's really bright white, it doesn't bleed very much, I can use pretty much any of my pens and markers on it without very much issue, but it only has 180 pages in it. So I realized when I was doing weekly spreads and also a daily journal for every single day, it was using up an insane amount of pages. So this journal I just started in June, and July is just wrapping up right now, and I've used like half the book. Like that's an insane amount of pages to be using for 2 months. If I continued at that rate, it would use like 4 or 5 of these journals throughout the entire year just to accommodate that. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to have a stack of like 4 or 5 journals every single year for this. And so I realized it's not really sustainable for me to be using this particular journal for my daily spreads as well as my weekly spreads. So starting in August, I wanted to try to switch things up a little bit and see if I can find a new thing that works for me. And I realized that if I take out my daily journaling from this particular notebook and I do just my weeklies and my trackers and all of that planning stuff, I have exactly enough pages to get me through the end of December, like down to the last page. It fits perfectly. And also, if I counted correctly, I should only need one of these notebooks for the entire year to accommodate just my planner section. And then, to accommodate all my daily journaling stuff, I actually picked up a separate journal. This is the Stalogy A6 sized editor series 365 days, I believe is what it's called. I'll put the name of the product on the screen in case I mangled that. But this is a notebook that is expressly meant for daily journaling. There are 368 pages in it, so there's meant to be a page for every single day of the year. And I've never really used these before, but I have heard a lot of people talk about them, and I think it's going to work for me. There are definitely a few things about this that I'm going to have to get used to, the first one being the paper quality. The paper in here is obviously much thinner than in my regular bullet journal. It has to be to accommodate that many pages, which means I am going to see some ghosting and maybe some bleeding depending on what pens I'm using. I did a pen test, almost everything showed through, but it's not really the end of the world. I have this tendency to think that if something isn't perfect, like if there's any ghosting or smudging or anything, like it's not good enough and then I have to throw it away or not use it. And honestly, like I journal for my mental health and to write things that are important to me, and having one notebook where I can put everything for a year is something that outweighs this like weird habit I have about needing things to be perfect. The other thing is something that I've really been kind of like agonizing over ever since I bought this notebook, which is that I'm setting up a daily journal in August. That means when I set up my new bullet journal for 2023, I'm going to have a daily journal that is now like 5 months behind it. And I know I just said I really need to like let go of that whole perfection thing, but I just know that's something that's going to irritate me and it's going to really bother me. And I'm pretty positive what I'm going to end up doing is stopping this particular notebook and getting a new one and starting that one off from January 1st also. So that way I have 2 notebooks for the entire year that are perfectly aligned. And I'm not going to let this go to waste. I will use the remaining pages just for like note taking or maybe like travel journaling, something like that that isn't necessarily daily journaling. And I know That's definitely not the most cost efficient or anything like that, but the other option was to have to set up a second bullet journal for the rest of my planning for this year, and I didn't want to do that either. So between the two options, this also allows me to test this paper out and see if I like it enough to start it again next year. So kind of lesser of two evils, and I don't feel great about it, but it is what it is. And I do know that Stalogy carries a half-year version of this notebook, which would have been a lot better to use now instead of the full year, but unfortunately the store that I bought this at only had this size notebook in the 365 days, and another thing is that I really wanted to size down to A6 instead of A5. As much as I love journaling, it really does take a toll on my hand. I mentioned I have tendinitis, my hand gets fatigued very quickly, and having a smaller amount of space to fill up means I don't have to write as much every day. So there's still enough space for me to write down important things and things that I want to remember, but I don't feel the need to fill out as much space, and I really wanted to do that just for the sake of my hand. Okay, so now that that's done, I want to just do a quick walkthrough of what I've done so far for August, and then I'm just going to do a quick weekly setup just to show you how I do it, even though it's not really different from what I've shown so far. And I was originally planning on filming this entire process, but the other day, like weeks before I planned on doing this, I was in the mood to start planning August, and so I just did. And for me, that's one of those things that I have found is also super duper important. For me, focusing and being productive comes in waves. It doesn't happen whenever I want it to. So if I'm ever in a position where I really want to be setting things up or I really want to be working on my planner for the year, I will just do it because I'm not going to pass up on that opportunity to be productive when I'm really, really feeling it. So this was just one of those things that I really felt like doing that day, and I'm glad that I did because I might not have wanted to do it when I was doing this video. While I was at it, I also decided to set up the first few pages in my Stalogy, and that just involved me sectioning off my task list and then writing the dates on top so those are all ready to go. For a notebook this thick, it can be hard to write on the first few pages because there's too much of a gap between the table and the front part of the notebook, so putting a book underneath it or something of a similar height to even it out is really, really helpful. It just so happened the only thing I had on hand that was the right size was this Let's Find Pokemon book. And that's pretty much it for this setup video. I know a lot of it was me kind of just showing what I've been doing and talking, but I wanted to explain really what has and hasn't been working for me as I'm trying to figure out the best way to be productive with the particular way my brain works. And so far, this seems to be pretty close to what I need it to be. We'll see how the Stalogy works out. I may end up doing a review at the end of the month just to see how I like it after using it for a while. I will also probably do a weekly plan with me at some point that shows how I set up my week to actually break down tasks and things like that. So hopefully that would be helpful to some of you guys. But if you guys have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them down below. And until my next video, I hope you have a great day. Bye. Okay, I need to turn my AC on or I'm gonna die. Oh my God.